"Ever thought about crossing that line?" she whispered. I didn't answer. HFY read it. The station drifted at the edge of known space, where the stars looked thinner and the dark between them felt heavier. From a distance, it looked like any other research platform: metal rings, sensor arrays, slow rotating habitat sections. But everyone stationed there knew the truth. This place existed for one reason only. It watched the line no one was allowed to cross. They called it the null boundary. No bright wall marked it, no glowing storm or visible edge. On the charts, it was just a region of space where data failed, signals twisted, and ships never returned. Entire alien civilizations had legends about it. Some called it the silence. Others called it the end of thought. The galactic treaties were clear and absolute. No species, under any reason, was allowed to cross the boundary, especially humans. Elias Ward stood alone in the observation module, hands resting lightly on the console. He was not a soldier. He was not a pilot. He was a systems analyst, the kind of human who noticed patterns others missed and spent long hours staring at numbers that most found boring. His job was simple on paper: compare sensor data from human-built instruments with readings from alien systems and report any differences. Most days, there were none worth mentioning. Today was different. The human sensors showed a faint, repeating fluctuation just beyond the boundary. It was subtle, almost like background noise. The alien instruments registered nothing at all. Elias frowned and adjusted the display, zooming in, running the same check again. The pattern stayed. It wasn't random. He was about to flag it for later review when a soft tone sounded in his ear. A private channel opened without a request. That alone made his shoulders tense. "Elias Ward," a calm voice said. It was smooth, neither male nor female, translated perfectly into his language. "You are observing the boundary." "That's my assignment." It looked the same as always: quiet, empty, waiting. "That's not funny," he finally said. "I am not joking," she replied. Elias swallowed. His heart beat a little faster, though his face stayed calm. "Why are you asking me that?" Elias stood still for several seconds, listening to the quiet hum of the station. He felt a chill, not from fear exactly, but from the sense that something had shifted. He turned back to the console and saved the sensor data to a private workspace, tagging it with a human-only encryption key. That alone was a small violation of protocol. He justified it easily. He needed to verify the results before sharing incomplete information. That was what he told himself. Over the next few hours, Elias compared archived data from the past 50 years of observation. Every species had used their own technology to study the boundary. None of it worked properly. Signals vanished. Probes lost cohesion. Artificial intelligences failed first, then biological crews followed. The official conclusion was simple: the boundary destroyed complexity. But when Elias overlaid the old human probe data, something stood out. The probes didn't fail instantly. They degraded, slowly, as if something inside them was being stripped away layer by layer. Memory corruption came first. Navigation errors followed. Structural failure came last. Not destruction, exposure. Elias leaned back in his chair, rubbing his eyes. Humans had been late to the galaxy. They learned early to listen more than they spoke. They signed treaties, accepted limits, and tried not to scare anyone. But humans also had a habit that made older species nervous. They kept asking why. He pulled up a restricted archive, one that required multiple authorizations. His access level shouldn't have allowed it. The system hesitated, then opened anyway. The human-built software recognized him, trusted him. The file titles were old, older than the treaties: early exploration logs, redacted reports, names of missions that officially never existed. One report caught his attention. A small probe, unmanned, launched just after humanity's first contact with the galactic community. It entered the boundary for exactly 30 seconds before being pulled back by a remote tether. Most of its data was corrupted, but one line remained intact: environmental conditions unknown, internal systems unstable, core function persists. Alien probes lost all function within seconds. Human probes held on even briefly, not because they were stronger or better built, because they were simpler, more stubborn. A warning tone broke his focus. Someone was approaching the module. He closed the archive and straightened just as the door slid open. Commander Hale stepped inside, her expression neutral but sharp-eyed. She had been in space most of her life, and it showed in the way she carried herself, calm, efficient, human. "You've been quiet today," she said. "That's usually a bad sign." "That's also a bad sign." "That's what I thought." It was a test, or maybe a warning. The galaxy believed the boundary was death, a final wall, something to be feared and avoided forever. Humans had learned long ago that some walls were not meant to stop you. Some were meant to see who would dare to touch them. Elias looked once more at the faint pattern on his screen, steady and patient, pulsing from beyond the line no one crossed. For the first time, he wondered if the boundary was not silent at all. Maybe it had been waiting. And maybe, without realizing it, humanity had already begun to answer. The station did not sleep, but it had quiet hours. During those hours, the lights dimmed slightly, background noise softened, and most of the crew stayed in their quarters. Elias preferred this time. Fewer eyes, fewer questions. He sat alone in his workspace, the glow of the screens reflecting in his tired eyes. The faint pattern beyond the null boundary was still there. It had not changed in shape or rhythm, only in clarity. The more he studied it, the more certain he became that it was not random energy or sensor error. It behaved like a response, as if something was listening. Elias pulled more historical data, going further back than before. He noticed something strange. Every time human sensors were upgraded or recalibrated, the pattern became clearer. Alien systems, no matter how advanced, still showed nothing. It was not a matter of power. It was a matter of design. Human instruments were noisy, imperfect, and full of small errors. Alien technology was clean and precise. Too controlled, Elias muttered. He remembered something an old professor once said back on Earth. Humans did not build machines to replace themselves. They built machines that failed like they did, learned like they did, and adapted like they did. It was considered inefficient by most species, but maybe inefficiency was the point. A soft knock came at the door. Elias froze for a second, then forced himself to relax. The door slid open and the liaison stepped inside. In this light, her chosen form looked almost human, but not quite. Her movements were too smooth, her eyes too steady. "You are working outside assigned hours," she said gently. "So are you," Elias replied. She inclined her head slightly. "That is true." Blind to what? At the center was the null boundary, an empty sphere where no lines passed through. "Every intelligent species we know evolved with external supports," she continued. "Shared memory fields, biological guidance systems, collective awareness. When those supports are removed, their minds collapse. Inside the boundary, those supports cannot exist." "You evolved without them," she said. "Your minds are isolated, no shared thoughts, no built-in guidance, only memory, emotion, and choice." It now showed early human brain scans, overlaid with stress markers and neural activity. The data spiked, then stabilized. "You feel fear," she said. "Confusion, doubt, but you continue. You do not shut down, you improvise." "Why are you telling me this?" Elias asked. "Because the Council buried this information," she said. "They fear what happens if humans understand the truth." "For the ability to think without guidance, to act without certainty." The liaison's posture stiffened. "The Council has detected your private data access." "Am I under arrest?" The questioning room was small and deliberately uncomfortable. The Council representatives appeared as holograms, their forms varied and unfamiliar. Some looked insect-like. Others were tall and smooth, with too many eyes or none at all. They did not waste time. "Human analyst Elias Ward," one of them said. "You have accessed restricted archives and withheld data from shared systems." "Explain." "It responds to our presence." You were instructed not to lie, she replied. The tension thickened. Humans are unpredictable, another council member said. That is why the restriction exists. It makes us useful, Elias countered. Commander Hale spoke up then. With respect, she said, if the boundary really is a test, then avoiding it forever isn't safety. It's delay. They were survivors who had learned to stay alive by avoiding the unknown. Humans had survived by walking into it. Finally, the council reached a decision. You will cease all independent research, they declared. All human instruments near the boundary will be recalibrated to shared standards. This discussion never occurred. So that's it, he said quietly. Pretend nothing's happening. Sooner or later. On the station near the null boundary, Elias noticed the first sign before anyone else. The faint pattern beyond the boundary began to change. It was no longer steady. It stretched, twisted, and folded in on itself, like something under pressure. Human sensors struggled to keep up, and even then the data came through incomplete. Alien systems still showed nothing, which only made the situation worse. If the council could not see the problem, they could not react to it. Elias stood in his workspace, watching the distortion grow. It's spreading, he said quietly. Commander Hale stood beside him, arms crossed. How fast? If it keeps expanding, it won't stay inside the boundary. Crew members rushed to their assigned posts, fear and confusion spreading faster than any signal. A priority channel opened, forcing itself onto every display. The council appeared, their forms tense and agitated. The null boundary is destabilizing, one of them said. All stations are ordered to withdraw to minimum safe distance. Minimum safe distance won't matter, she said under her breath. Elias stepped forward, speaking before he could be stopped. With respect, he said, pulling back won't fix this. Running away doesn't do that. The boundary has existed longer than, and it's doing it in a way only human systems can detect. No species survives entry. The boundary strips away support systems. The fewer dependencies, the better the chance. One human mind, one ship designed to fail and keep going. You understand what entry will do to you, she said. I understand what not entering will do to everyone else, Elias replied. The distortion surged again, stronger this time. The station shook hard enough to knock crew members off their feet. Somewhere deep in the structure, metal groaned. Time ran out. The council's decision came not from courage, but from fear of worse consequences. One attempt, they said, no more. Elias strapped himself in, hands shaking only slightly. He focused on breathing. In, out, count to 4 again. Hale's voice came through the comm. If you feel anything wrong, you abort immediately. Do not fight confusion, accept it. Elias felt pressure in his chest like the air had thickened. His instruments flickered, data streams cutting in and out. His thoughts slowed, then sped up without warning. Fear rose sharp and sudden. He forced himself not to panic. Name 5 things, he thought. A grounding exercise from old training manuals. He spoke them aloud. My hands, the seat. The hum of the engine, my breathing. The timer on the console. Stubborn refusal to stop. He leaned into that. Keep going, he told himself. Just keep going. The pressure eased. A presence made itself known. Not a voice, not a shape, more like a tension. Elias felt seen. He did not resist it. He did not try to understand it. He simply existed in its awareness, flawed and uncertain and human. Images formed around him. Other species entering the boundary and breaking under the loss of guidance. Minds unraveling when alone for the first time. Then images of humans, lost explorers, isolated survivors, individuals facing silence and choosing to speak anyway. The presence reacted. The distortion beyond the boundary slowed, stabilized. Elias felt himself being pushed gently, firmly back the way he came. The stars returned in a rush of light. Alarms screamed as systems rebooted. The ship tumbled, damaged but intact. Elias barely noticed. He was laughing and crying at the same time, breath hitching as reality settled back into place. The station loomed ahead, crews scrambling to pull him in. The boundary behind him was quiet again, not silent, watching. Elias closed his eyes as the ship docked, exhaustion crashing over him like a wave. He did not know what he had changed, only that something had changed him. And the galaxy would never see the line the same way again. The station welcomed him back with the usual chaos of alarms, flashing lights, and shouting crew members, but Elias felt almost detached from it all. His mind was still inside the boundary, replaying every second of the strange, shifting space where reality bent and the stars disappeared. The place had been alive in a way no machine or intelligence had warned them about. It had tested him, probed his mind, and yet somehow it had accepted him. Commander Hale met him at the docking bay, her expression unreadable. "You made it," she said quietly. Her voice carried relief and something else Elias could not immediately name, respect maybe or disbelief. "No one expected you to survive, or come back whole." Fine did not capture what had happened inside the boundary. Fine did not capture the feeling of something watching and understanding, and of a human mind being different from all others. Inside the command center, the liaison appeared as she always did, calm and observing. Her projection flickered slightly as though uncertain how to represent what she had seen. "You have passed," she said. "The boundary recognizes the persistence of human cognition. It will allow progress where others would fail." The Council's rules, the treaties, the prohibitions, these were based on the assumption that humans could not endure the boundary. They were wrong. They could survive where others could not, simply by keeping their minds active, adaptable, and willing to act despite the unknown. The Council's holograms flickered to life in the room. Their tone was cautious but strained, as though they were balancing curiosity against fear. "Elias Ward," one said, "your actions were unprecedented. You crossed the null boundary and returned. The implications are not yet clear. Explain yourself." That is why the boundary responds to us differently than it does to other species. We can survive alone. We can act when certainty fails. That is not weakness. It is a strength no one else possesses. The galaxy has underestimated your species. That is the kind of strength that cannot be contained by laws or walls. The boundary will not close to you again. You have passed its test. Your species has been acknowledged, though not fully understood, by forces older than any treaty or council. You have changed its relationship with the galaxy. The adrenaline that had carried him through the boundary was fading, leaving his mind and body drained. But even in fatigue, he felt alert, focused, alive in a way that transcended ordinary awareness. Over the next few days, the station functioned under a tense but renewed sense of purpose. Crew members whispered among themselves about what had happened, about Elias, and about the strange phenomenon beyond the boundary. Sensor readings were now continuously monitored, but Elias alone had the understanding to interpret them. He realized that the faint pattern he had first noticed was a signal, an invitation, a test, but it had also been a mirror. The boundary reflected the persistence of human thought and resilience back into reality. He worked with Hale and a small team of trusted colleagues to establish a plan. This was no longer about surveillance or passive observation. The boundary was part of a larger system, one that had the potential to influence regions of space in ways no one had yet imagined. Humans could now interact with it in ways others could not. The liaison remained a constant presence, guiding without commanding, explaining without dictating. She showed Elias traces of civilizations that had attempted entry and failed. Their minds had collapsed under the loss of guidance. Entire fleets had vanished. Elias could see the difference clearly. The failure of others was not because of lack of intelligence, but because their species relied on external systems too much. Humans relied on themselves. That reliance, imperfect and chaotic, had allowed survival. Elias began to prepare reports for the council. Not the usual sterile summaries of data, but explanations of human capability and insight, framed so that the alien species could not ignore them. He emphasized not arrogance, but adaptability, not dominance, but endurance. He showed how humans could cooperate with other species while also acting independently in ways no other species could. The council listened, some with skepticism, some with fascination. Slowly, the tone of their meetings changed. They asked questions, debated possibilities, and began to consider human potential in a new light. Fear was still present, but it was tempered by understanding. And understanding, as Elias knew, was the first step toward respect. Weeks passed. The boundary stabilized, its distortions retreating, but the impact of Elias' journey persisted. Humans on the station began to receive missions and responsibilities previously denied to them. They were allowed to design new probes and even manned missions to the edge of unknown space. Their perspective, once dismissed as reckless, was now recognized as essential. Elias himself took a small step back from active observation. He spent time mentoring younger crew members, sharing lessons learned about endurance, focus, and navigating uncertainty. He told them about the boundary, not in technical terms, but in terms of human resilience. "It doesn't destroy us," he said, "because we never stop. We adapt. We endure. That is who we are. Acting is." And in doing so, they had reminded the galaxy that some limits existed only for those unwilling to face the unknown. Humans faced it anyway. In the following months, humans expanded their influence near the boundary, not through conquest but through presence, exploration, and observation. They built vessels capable of brief excursions, trained specialists to understand the unique challenges of unknown space, and shared their findings cautiously with allied species. The galaxy began to see them not as unpredictable children, but as a species with remarkable resilience and insight. Elias continued to observe from the station, the faint pattern on the sensors now steady and readable. He knew the boundary had not been defeated or tamed. It was still a test, still a force beyond complete understanding, but humans had proven they could meet it, act within it, and endure. One evening, as the station lights dimmed for rest cycles, Elias sat by the viewport, looking at the dark stretch of space beyond. The stars glimmered faintly at the edge of perception. Somewhere deep inside, the boundary pulsed, a silent observer of human persistence. He felt no fear, only recognition. The galaxy had been challenged and humanity had answered. They had crossed the line, returned, and changed the rules, not through power, not through weapons, but through persistence, curiosity, and the courage to act when all else seemed uncertain. Elias whispered quietly to himself, more to the stars than anyone else. "Some lines exist to show you who you are. We've already crossed them." Humans had defined their own limits, and in doing so, reminded the galaxy why humanity would always endure. The null boundary pulsed faintly one last time that night, as if in acknowledgement, and then settled into quiet. The galaxy could not ignore humans anymore, and humanity would not stop moving forward, not ever.